Hi, everyone. Sorry about my voice. I go to karaoke too often. My talk today is called Web 3.0, Discoverability in a Dark Age. And so my talk today is not going to be heavy on slides, and at its base, it's about the importance of community and bringing people together. So I'll start with, who am I? My name is Rachel White, and I'm a technical evangelist at Datadog, where I've been for 5.5 years. I focus primarily on products that involve client-side development, such as our real user monitoring and APM and synthetics testing. I do a lot of technical writing. I build demos, record video content, write workshops that explain highly technical concepts in a way that is accessible to users. And I also helped launch an internal public speaking course for our employees that helps walk people through getting up on stage for the first time and sharing their stories. Because when it all breaks down to the individual, we all have different experiences with how we interact with problems and also our colleagues. So I encourage those people who think that they don't have anything interesting to speak about to challenge that, because all of our experiences are unique. What you've encountered through problem solving of your own is vastly different than a way anyone else would have experienced it. And that's because it happened to you. And that's basically what fuels me as a dev, the human experience. I'm entering my 16th year in tech, and I'm completely self-taught thanks to early internet communities. But more importantly, because of something that I experienced 11 years ago, that changed how I engaged with tech as a profession and how I viewed community. And that was JSConf 2014. I attended with a team of colleagues who didn't really make it that great of an experience. So I did what I've always naturally done because I have zero stranger danger, and that's I went out on my own and just started talking to people. It also helped that at the time the pool was open for 24 hours. And I love swimming, so you can just hang out in the pool and talk to people. But I also went to so many talks, met so many people, and made friends that I will have for the rest of my life. The talk that stood out to me the most was Brian Brennan's talk on being human. It was super inspiring, and after speaking to him after it, finding out we both lived in New York City, he told me about Brooklyn JS, and I started attending regularly. I became friends with Jen Schiffer, who encouraged me to start speaking and had me speak for the first time that year at DHTMLConf 2000. And that was my first time traveling ever outside of going to JSConf earlier that year. And that was really only the beginning. Because in my first experience at JSConf, I wouldn't have been able to be, sorry, I'm gonna try not to cry this early, been able to be the first group of hosts of the JS Party podcast alongside Michael Rogers and Alex Sexton. I wouldn't have gotten involved in open source, primarily Node.js, and gotten the opportunity to co-chair the Node.js community committee alongside Tierney. And I wouldn't have had my extremely passionate and sometimes too intense for corporate America care for the user first. And I wouldn't be so stubborn, which I take as a positive trait for my willingness to teach and inspire young devs and make them aware of what's possible if they just try. And so the main point to this is that communities have always found a way to come together. And JSConf is proof that the power of community and connection is great. It's a perfect example of how bringing people together, treating them with kindness, letting them know that they're in a safe space, encouraging curiosity and exploration, and taking what you've learned and bringing things back to your own local community helps spread the same kind of message. And so I want everybody to keep that message in mind as we go over a brief history and breakdown of online communities and learn about what you can do today to make sure that we can keep that spirit alive. So we're gonna start with the early internet, Web 1.0. Obviously, I'm skipping over a ton, but this will be the abridged version. And so, as we all know, the internet hasn't always been open. Before Tim Berners-Lee proposed the World Wide Web, there were still active communities, but it was mostly like very extreme hobbyists and people that had access via their universities. And one of those communities was Usenet. As new users joined Usenet, it didn't really affect the people that were there that much since it was such a slow influx. And the exception to that was every September, when students enrolled in universities and started to have access. Existing users would really dread that month because the new users weren't familiar with the etiquette of how to interact in a new space. Eventually, it would level off. People would leave the communities if they felt like it wasn't for them, or they would get used to the rules and the way to behave and become a part of the community. However, in 1994, after ISPs became available for the general public, the influx of new users was so great that legacy users referred to the feeling of the boards as then an eternal September, because they couldn't support and moderate all the people. Community is really hard to maintain, especially when it once was extremely insular. But I think this is a great segue into a much more fun growth of community. With GeoCities launching in 1994 and AngelFire in 1996, people were able to quickly and easily get their own personal website up and running. People had a way to connect easier because of shared interests. You could make a website about whatever you wanted, and since the URLs that were available to the users were structured in a way that made discoverability easier based off of what your site was about, people could find what they wanted. You could sign guest books and have web rings of personal sites that people could click through to find more similar content. And even if you didn't know HTML, there was still plenty of sites that had copy and pastable code so you could get the look that you wanted. We still didn't have social media yet, and the desire to create was driven purely by the communities that people had found. And as people learned more and more through the self-hosting on GeoCities and AngelFire, some people took the next step further and started self-hosting their own websites. And as people started to learn more about, client side and server side, the web just really opened up the possibilities, and that's what brings us into Web 2.0. So the term Web 2.0 was coined in a 1999 article by Darcy DiNucci with this quote: "The web we know now, which loads into a browser window in essentially static screenfuls, is only an embryo of the web to come. The first glimmerings of Web 2.0 are beginning to appear, and we're just starting to see how that embryo might develop. The web will be understood not as screenfuls of text and graphics, but as a transport mechanism, the ether through which interactivity happens. It will appear on your computer screen, on your TV set, your car dashboard, your cell phone, handheld game machines, maybe even your microwave oven." And if they only knew how true this was. The web was a platform with endless possibilities. Social media like MySpace, Friendster, Facebook. And at that same time, companies started providing services based off of that user data, with Google utilizing the user-generated data on the web to create web searches based off of a PageRank algorithm. Social media enabled you to rank your friends and even include snippets of code so that you could see who was looking at your profile. Wikipedia relied on users and trust to verify data. In 2006, Time Magazine's Person of the Year was you. It referenced Web 2.0, and in the cover story, Lev Grossman stated, "It's a story about community and collaboration on a scale never seen before. It's about the cosmic compendium of knowledge, Wikipedia and the million-channel People's Network YouTube, and the online metropolis MySpace. It's about the many wresting power from the few and helping one another for nothing, and how that will not only change the world, but also change the way the world changes." Which sounds great, right? But what happens when you become the product? So as more and more people started to gain access to the internet, the shape of the web for users and for devs started to rapidly change. The way we programmed began to change. Social media's purpose started to shift. And what was once a gathering place started changing into something much different. Because of the rise of social media, content creation started becoming more of the forefront of the internet, with places like Twitch, Twitter, and Reddit becoming the hubs. And as new developers looked more and more to communities like Reddit's R Programming and Hacker News, people became much more familiar with socializing on the internet. And as people felt more comfortable being themselves, it also emboldened the darker parts of the internet. And while I'd like to think that the main sources of community online have been for good, they've also been breeding grounds for extreme sources of negativity. Sites like 4chan and Kiwi Farms proliferated people hiding behind anonymity, because it's much easier to criticize people being themselves online when you're the one hiding behind an avatar. This kind of behavior online also made it incredibly hard for governing open source. And so I want to bring this back to JavaScript, since we are at a JSConf. And in 2012, Ryan Dahl announced Node.js at JSConf US. And just 6 years later at JSConf EU 2018, they gave a talk on the 10 things that I regret about Node. And I'm not going to go into detail about the nuances on the content, but more want to focus on the rapid development of ecosystems around JavaScript. Because 6 years in my brain, maybe I'm getting old, but it should be a short amount of time. And in the world that we're living in now, the development life cycle is happening so much faster than that. And when you're not involved in the governance of an open source language or framework, it's easy from the outside to separate the technology from the people. It's something that we all interact with every day, but there's also a cult of personality involved when you're the figurehead for a community. And even more so when you are the people volunteering their spare time to contribute in addition to your own regular job. And unfortunately, these are the people that shoulder the brunt of the backlash from the communities. I will say that we are all here because we care, and we care deeply about the things that we are working on. Becoming a developer can change people's lives, but the way you as an individual interact with others is what the essential piece of the puzzle that gives people a positive or negative experience and changes their trajectory of how they view interacting with being a software engineer as a whole. As somebody who was involved in that community aspect deeply, I've seen awful things. I've experienced watching colleagues and myself be deeply harassed online, doxxed, have their livelihoods jeopardized, employers contacted, physically threatened, fully quit being an engineer. And that's all for simply wanting to be a maintainer, or more often than not, be a vocal marginalized person who cares about making an open and welcoming space available for everyone. So as JavaScript frameworks and libraries began to grow, the move from vanilla JavaScript to TypeScript to people criticizing jQuery to arguments over Angular, Ember, React, Yarn, NPM, the list could literally go on and on. It's never going to stop being this way because we're all human, and humans have preferences. And they're going to defend those preferences as an inherent way of self-preservation, because we don't want to be challenged for the most part. But what we can do is, instead of causing infighting among different communities that share the same goal, is encouraging growth and bringing in new users. We can and should direct our focus to bringing people up alongside us in whatever area that we're involved in. I also have to touch a bit on COVID as having a massive impact to the effect of community. Where we used to have plenty of global community events and local hyper-regional conferences, we were stuck inside for years. We couldn't meet in person. And there became a market for companies to run webinar conferences where your content would be recorded, and instead of published on YouTube, it would go onto proprietary platforms, and you also wouldn't get to have those hallway conference opportunities. And while people were still trying to make connections, we still had to deal with the temporary loss of why we're all here for today, which is connecting with each other on a one-on-one basis and getting to have these in-person conversations, which leads us to the current state of the internet, which is Web 3.0. And I just want to say that I don't think that what we're in is what people are referring to as Web 3.0. But I do want to talk about the current state of the web over the past few years and how it's affected online communities. And that's basically, there's no easy way to trust or verify things anymore. Everything is a product, everything is exploitable, and it all breaks down to one word, and that's trust. We don't know if we're interacting with real users or with bots. We can't trust user reviews on e-commerce sites. We can't trust that the article that we're reading was written by a real user. We can't even put out our own content or our own art without worrying if it's being scraped for data or being stolen and passed off as someone else's. In an article from September 2024 on the BBC website, it says that a Pew Research study showed that 25% of web pages posted between 2013 and 2023 have vanished. 1 in 5 government websites contains at least one broken link, and more than half of Wikipedia articles have a broken link in their references section. The internet is a fire hose of information, and it's next to impossible to preserve all that history. In 2023, Google updated its search engine algorithm and absolutely changed the shape of the internet as we know it. It updated it again in March 2024 and essentially made discoverability go down the drain. It's now harder to find niche areas of the internet or even find small businesses. It's breaking communities and it's spreading disinformation. Once the AI-suggested summaries rolled out, social media was awash with people sharing screenshots of the incorrect, sometimes funny, sometimes dangerous suggestions that would be at the top. I was going to post some screenshots that people had shared, but I couldn't even find them anymore with the state of the current search algorithms, and I've long given up on trying to search Twitter for anything useful. But that's not all. We're now having people interacting with AI chatbots for things such as therapy and dating. We're encountering a new phenomenon known as AI psychosis because people don't know how to believe what is real or not anymore. And it's not making it easier for us as devs. Younger devs are relying on vibe coding and asking ChatGPT to code, and they're not verifying the source. They aren't learning the skills that you only learn by interacting one-on-one with other devs, such as reading stack traces, debugging, having conversations with users. Product life cycles are getting so fast that it's making it harder and harder to keep up with well-written documentation and community support. GitHub and package managers are constantly being used as attack vectors now due to people forking trusted sources and providing the same tech, but with code exploits baked in to steal information and credentials at the least. So what can we do? And so the future of the web to me is really hoping that people don't stop caring. Please keep bringing people along with you. As discoverability becomes harder and harder, and as the way that we share information continues to shift, our best hope for the future is on a local level. Be involved in local meetups, be involved in mentoring young devs, and encouraging them not to be afraid to ask questions, and not to rely on the first page of Google results or AI-generated content as a source of truth. Encourage curiosity, encourage learning through failure. If you have the bandwidth, get involved in the organizations that shape the standards of the web. It's a lot of work, but even sitting in on open source calls, being a part of those web standards meetings, you don't even have to contribute. Just watching and learning can help you give you valuable knowledge about the intricacies on how things work. So while the majority of the current ecosystem of the internet values profit over people, there's nothing that will ever crush the human experience of wanting to know the why and how of things work. And learning those things through human connections is how we can push for change in the way that we share and preserve information. So while we've moved from a free and open internet to a bunch of paywalled gardens, it doesn't mean that you can't create your own beautiful space online and in real life for people to exist. And so I encourage everyone to not get discouraged if you can no longer find the communities that were once available easily at your fingertips, because you can be the ones to build them and help shape the next generation. Thanks.